Hi, my name is Josue, and today I'm going to be answering some questions from our chapter 13 and our chapter 14 for this week. So, the first question that I'm going to be addressing is going to be based off of Murray Bowen's natural systems theory. So, Bowen, he had about 8 interlocking concepts that he discusses, but they're all based off of balancing this seeking of individuality as well as maintaining a sense of togetherness or community. So, his first concept that he addresses is the differentiation of self. So, this is the tendency of a person to grow an emotionally separate person or individuality, the push towards feelings and acting as a distinct individual, even though you are still maintaining a sense of togetherness. So this might look like a high school student who's going off to college, trying to find their sense of individuality of self in the world, but they're also still leaning on their family back home and maintaining that togetherness and also building healthy relationships in college, such as friendships, maybe bonds with professors, to be able to keep that balance. Another concept that Bowen talks about is the emotional cutoff. So, this is when individuals don't know how to balance seeking individuality and their sense of togetherness. This might look like a family who is very interlocked, and individuals don't have the opportunity to express their self or their individuality. And because of this, whenever they get the opportunity, they may decide to completely withdraw from the family, having physical boundaries or completely physical separation from their community. Or it might look in the form of, although they maintain themselves surrounded by other individuals, apparently maintaining a sense of togetherness, they might be emotionally withdrawn completely from individuals around them. Another concept that Bowen talks about is the sibling position. So, sibling position is a little bit different from birth order because even though it can be together, it's a little bit different in the regard of, for example, you might have a child who is autistic and they might be the older child, which in sibling order we would possibly assume through other viewpoints that the sibling would be the responsible one or the one who would always be taking charge and caring for others. But in this case, because the older sibling is autistic, the younger sibling who has is normal would take on a caretaker role for this older sibling. So they carry on a functional position within the family. So the nuclear family emotional process, this is another concept that Bowen talks about. It kind of just refers to the togetherness of families, and how families come together when in dire situations whenever it's needed. So this might be due to illness or strife between parents. Family might coalesce and come together because of this. Triangles, this is another concept of Bowen. It talks about people are connected to multiple individuals. So even though we are creating the sense of togetherness, it's really not just with one person, but it is a conglomeration of various individuals that interplay to keep the balance of togetherness in our lives. So the family projection process refers to parents transmitting their level of differentiation onto one or more children, believing there is something wrong with them. Whatever the child does is viewed as confirmation of their fear for the child. Can be viewed as a triangle when two parents triangulate a child to offset their anxiety. So essentially what this is talking about is that parents might have the presumption that one of their child has some type of mental disability or social disparities, and because of this they start to hyperfixate on this area of the child's life, possibly causing a lot of anxiety on the child. So even though there is a healthy balance in between addressing possible concerns that as parents you might have or that parents have on their child, it's important to go about this in a way that is conducive for the child to be able to create a healthy sense of self and a healthy sense of togetherness and community. If not, it can cause a lot of anxiety for the child. Multi-generational transmission process refers to how our ways of being, our personality, our behaviors are influenced by our ancestors and the people that came before us. It really isn't just the nuclear family that shapes us, but even grandparents, great grandparents that have kind of passed these patterns on, that influence our sense of being and self and togetherness. Societal emotional process expands this concept of togetherness, not just to the nuclear family, but even to the culture at large and society. It refers to how even culturally, our society, the social structure can influence who we are as individuals and how we view individuality as well as togetherness. So, for example, if you here in America, we live in a more individualistic type of society. So, even though possibly your family or your nuclear family is collectivist, you might be able to subscribe more to this individualistic type of self or sense of self because of the community or the society at large that you belong to. All right, so now I'm going to address the question of how do the five dimensions of relational reality and contextual therapy help the family therapist understand what is happening within the family system. So first we have here, the first dimension is the systems of transactional patterns. So this is when therapists have an understanding that the conglomeration of members of the family with their own facts and individual psychology come together to form a system. So similar to what we were talking about before, how the individual sense of self is influenced by their individual psychology, their individual views of who they are, all as well as what is around them or the nuclear family. The second dimension that we're going to address is relational ethics. Relational ethics, which is referring to merits. So ethics is usually regarded as talking about rules and guidelines, but here it's talking about merits. So this views looks at the trust in relationships between individuals, and in this give and take type of dynamic. So it's trying to see if there is a balance, right, between relationships. So a practical example of this is me and my best friend, right? We both live kind of far from each other. We live about an hour and a half from each other. But I feel like in our relationship, there is a balanced give or take. I feel like we talk to each other when we need each other. If I ever feel like I need anything, I know that she'll be there for me. And if, vice versa. So that's kind of what it's talking about here in relational ethics. Facts refers to the components of ourselves and our lives. So this refers to gender, birth order, race, and past physical history and socioeconomic status. This is just, kind of like the things that we talk about that are fun facts about us. So like for me, I identify as male. I identify myself as Hispanic, Dominican. So these are all things that are unique to who I am. Um, a little bit deeper into this is individual psychology. So this is kind of not so much the superficial things maybe that others can see and identify about us, but really our internal world. So it takes into account how the person functions as a distinct individual, their sense of self, the way that they think, their uniqueness. Yeah, pretty much that's what that is. In my life, for example, I feel like I have a pretty good awareness of my individual psychology. I view myself as a pretty independent individual. I view myself as a deep thinker. I'm pretty optimistic. So these are all characteristic traits that I think kind of characterize my internal psychology or my individual psychology, things that might be distinct to how others view the world. Ontic, this fifth and final dimension, refers to the self and relations. So an awareness of being a self with unique thoughts and feelings. So kind of similar to individual psychology, but it is this awareness of how you are different from others. Um, an example of this in my life might be how I understand that I am a deep spiritual person, and that is something that is unique to me, and that might be different from how others view the world. So I am a deep spiritual person, and I view that that is a unique um, thing about my individual psychology. All right. So the third question, based on chapter 13 that I'm going to address, is in experiential therapies, what is the relationship between the individual and the family? So in experiential therapies, or in this form of therapy, the family and the individual is viewed as being interconnected. So even though it might acknowledge that we are individuals and that we have an individual sense of self, this form of therapy has an emphasis on the shaping of that in regards to the family system and in regards to systems, not just in an isolated vacuum per se. All right. So now I'm going to move on to address questions based on chapter 14. All right. So the first question that I'm going to be addressing is, how does the strategic family therapist view view one spouse's substance abuse? Sorry. How could this affect the therapeutic environment? Okay, so the strategic family therapist, that's what we're going to be talking about in this question. Um, so strategic family therapists, they view that both parties play a role in the substance abuse. So this is can be positive and also can be negative. The positive of this is that it creates more of a collaborative effort to try to address the substance abuse. It is less confrontational and less accusatory because the spouses, right, or these partners can come together to try to find a solution towards the substance abuse. I do think that this can be conflicting for some spouses, because if there isn't a healthy dynamic of communication, regardless, even though it's trying to be collaborative, it can become accusatory, and one person can be taking on too much of the blame if the therapist doesn't know how to appropriately maneuver this conversation of a collaborative effort in a collaborative role, and that plays into the substance abuse, if that makes any sense. All right. So the second question that I'm going to be addressing based on chapter 14 is, how might addiction impact a family's organization and independent states of being? Specifically, I'm going to be conceptualizing this question through the lens of structural family therapy. So disrupt One way that this can become an issue is that it disrupts the family roles and patterns. So families create roles and they create patterns that help them function and maintain a sense of homeostasis within the family. And so whenever these patterns are disrupted, it can cause a lot of strife and heightened anxiety in the family. Um, a structural family therapist may go about trying to restructure the family into healthy boundaries and communication patterns to try to rebuild that sense of structure that functions best for that family. And that is unique to each family, and it's unique to each individual within the family. So it is important for the therapist to acknowledge the individuality of each person in the family, as well as the uniqueness of the particular family that they are dealing with. The third question that I'm going to be addressing is explaining an example of each of the three main questions in solution focused brief therapy, and relate each to implementation within therapeutic endeavor. So I'm gonna be giving the example of each of these three questions, as well as implementing them in therapeutic endeavors, as the question states. So the first one of the questions that is asked in solutions focused brief therapy is the miracle question. So the miracle question is imagining a future with your problem gone. So this might look like an individual coming into therapy and mentioning how they feel a lot of heightened anxiety and stress in their life due to their work. So they might be stressed because of their coworkers not taking on responsibilities, whatever the situation may be. And so let's say, for example, you've been hearing or just listening, taking inventory of everything that the client is mentioning. It might be worthy to gain insight into a time in the client's life where they didn't feel anxiety. So you might propose the question, can you explain to me a time where you didn't feel as anxious at work, or you felt happy at work, or you enjoyed going to work? All of these questions might kind of help the individual start to think about times where life was a little bit different and how we can get back to that place where they felt healthier and more fulfilled in their job. Another question that can be asked is the pre-session change question. So this question explores any positive shifts that occurred between the appointment and the session. So let's say that the same client, you saw them last week and they were complaining about their life situation, and you created some goals for them. And so this next session, you ask the question possibly, has there been any positive changes in your life? Do you still feel anxious at work? Questions such as these kind of help measure the improvement that the client is having, or if they're making any positive strides in changing or fostering a healthier life or a healthier work environment for them. A third question that you can ask is a scaling question. So this is utilizing numerical scales to track progress. So using the same client as an example, we can ask this client from a level or from a scale of 1 to 10, how anxious do you feel at work? And so this kind of helps us as therapists kind of get an idea of how anxious the individual is feeling and the severity of the situation and how we should go about it. So those are the three questions that in solutions focused based therapy we can use and implement into our therapeutic practice or endeavors. The fourth question that I'm going to be addressing, and the final question, is what role do the three main questions in solution in sorry, say that again. So what role do the three main questions in solution focused brief therapy hold, and how do they enhance a client's self-awareness? So the role that these questions, I believe, play in solutions focused therapy is that it shifts the focus of the problem and it kind of helps us try to start finding solutions. Now, I will say that it is important to, before implementing this form of therapy, to really have a good grasp on what the client has going on, their stressors, everything that is going on, right? But I do think that at some point it is helpful because the client is more than likely there to create some type of positive change in their life. I think that this is a very positive or a very helpful form of therapy to help clients start to shift their attention into changes and positive changes that they can make in their life to help them, be able to improve. So this is my video addressing questions from chapter 13 and chapter 14, and thank you for watching.